Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our practice edition where we look at improvements we made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. I am Uriel Eisen from Austere Manufacturing.
And I'm Devin Bedoni from Lichen Precision.
And you got a quote?
Be hard on the process, but soft on the operators. Credited to Toyota, generally, out of Toyota Kata.
I like this quote.
Me too, as usual.
I have found that this is essentially the key to continuous improvement in general, and getting people to start surfacing problems is to make it very clear that any failure is basically attributable to a process being bad.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't reflect poorly on a person when something like the machine crashed. We don't have enough verification
Sure.
or validation / I would love it if you were more careful next time. But I mean, I think it's important to hold that stuff back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's probably examples of gross incompetence where people purposefully go outside of a given process.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of an extreme, but that's not ever anything I've experienced in my own business. And
yeah, I mean, in legal documents, there's different classifications, right? There's negligence, there's gross negligence, There's willful misconduct. I forget. Anyway, there's different classifications, and this is definitely dealing with we are all doing our best.
Yeah.
And I've just seen so many times when new people join the team and a problem arises they want to bring to my attention, a level of nervousness instead of sort of a level of hey, I found a new problem. This is great.
Yeah.
Let's solve this problem.
Yeah. No, it's so important. Yeah. And I think also it's just a good way to be in general. I think that's just
soft on people.
Yeah. It's good to just, be a nice person. To begin with, but then also it engenders a sense of teamwork or of being on the same team.
Yeah.
That I think is hard to create any other way.
Right.
I think there's a lot of employers who are really nice until things go wrong. And then
that is true. Yes.
And then it becomes clear that you're not actually on the same team. They were just taking advantage of you.
Right.
Effectively.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah.
And so I think being the counterpoint to that is very helpful in creating a sense of teamwork and camaraderie. And also it does create, out of that comes this amazing ability to solve things as a team.
Yeah. And solve them in a way where they won't happen again, or that it's going to be even harder for them to happen again. The other part that I've found useful is that a lot of failures, while they're annoying, often could have happened at a much worse time for the business. And so it's sort of there's often a possible sort of silver lining of thank you for finding this vulnerability the business had, which is real. Right. So that we can solve it so that it doesn't happen on a new customer or on a...
It's if a plane were about to take off and the engine falls off and the guy working on it is I'm so sorry. And you're well, thank God it didn't happen in the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, the engine fell off. That's a bummer.
And we should probably figure out how that happened and why that was allowed to happen.
And why you loosening this one bolt made the engine fall off.
Yeah.
Turns out our systems are not very robust.
Yeah, but it was discovered on the ground.
Yeah.
With that, do you want to kick us off with some improvements?
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of a broad picture one, but we are prepping for our transition to using Fusion 360 instead of SolidWorks plus HSMWorks as a primary programming platform.
Interesting.
In an effort to make it more accessible to more people in the shop and grow sort of our skills knowledge base.
And is that just a price point issue? Why couldn't you make SolidWorks more available?
Partially price point. So it's multifaceted. One was price. One was that HSMWorks is not being supported anymore, so I didn't want to dedicate a lot more energy.
If you're going to train people, let's train them on okay.
And then Fusion, I think, naturally lends itself to a team environment because of the cloud-based file storage, and it's built around having teamwork in that.
Gotcha. Cool.
And just the general knowledge base within our community of people who make stuff and are machinists. Like, I know a lot of very talented machinists wwho work on that platform in Fusion, who I can be like, excuse me, ring, ring, I'm having an issue. Help, please. And I'd like to contribute to that, which, like, you know, is a long way out, I think. But assuming there's multiple of us working in the shop and we're developing these, you know, templates and workflows, I think we will at some point. So anyway, I have Aiden, my new employee, has he graduated college this last year, I think, with manufacturing engineering degree, and he has quite a lot of experience in different CAD/CAM environments. So this last week, he put a bunch of time into building out templates for the mill and the lathe.
Okay.
He kind of basically took what I had been using in SolidWorks, but is adding a bunch of functionality to it.
Very cool.
And we have a little bit of work to do, but I think it's kind of like work that's going to be hard to figure out until we're actually trying to use it.
Yes.
So that was a huge step.
That's awesome.
And it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know when I'm going to figure this out. And clearly it took a lot of time because he knows what he's doing, and it took the better part of a week.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a big...
That's a big lift.
Big lift.
Yeah, I had the chance to swing by the shop, which I hadn't seen since he moved in, I think.
Yeah.
It was cool to see.
Yeah.
We posted some photos and videos of the brief tour.
Yep.
On the Instagram. Let's see. This was a fun one. We built which we discussed last episode, built a new piece of our assembly station, a cart. It was not intended to do this, but it resulted in a U-shaped cell.
Classic. Because
it was on wheels. We kind of went to build it, and then we were like, wait a second. It was to replace an existing countertop. And then we're like, what if we just turned this 90 degrees so it made a U? And then in working in there, because it's on wheels, it's really easy to sort of get it to the width that works for you.
Yeah.
Which is pretty nice. It sort of raised a question for me. I think the nomenclature of a U-shaped cell makes people want to make it look like a U, but that's really not the point. The point is that it's like the quickest to access a bunch of different stations, essentially.
Without, fewest steps.
Well, I think quickest, and few steps is often the quickest of just turning. And so, but I guess what I see often is that, and I've built these too, so I'm kind of like, I don't know how to balance the U-ness of the cell with like the size and how much space is inside to operate, because this one is tight and it's awesome. But a lot of them end up being pretty big, where it is sort of to like 2 or 3 steps to the other side.
Sure.
Which is better than a linear cell where it's like 5 steps down to the end or 10 steps to the end instead of like 3 steps across.
Yeah.
Right. Like if it's all in a line, that's going to be pretty long. And then to get end to end. And if it's in a U and you want to go from step 1 to step 5, but I'm not sure why you'd want to get to step 5, but I guess if you go from step 1 to step 10 in a line and then have to get back to step 1, that's a lot of walking.
Well, I think the classic thing that you and I both have discovered in some rearranging of shipping stations and whatnot is like you often have some kind of a constraint, like a computer interface or right, like something that you can't
I'm laughing because it's a stupid constraint.
It is.
Literally the other day we were like, why is that screen there? It makes no sense.
We've had similar things, but regardless, like at some point it like doesn't make sense to have 3 computers in one station, because now you have to have like, unless they really do unique things, you end up having like the same tab open in 3 different places. And so often I think there are things like that in a cell where it's like you need to use this here, turn around, grab a thing, move it to this other place, use the thing again. So I think it's best to mitigate that, but oftentimes there are things.
Yeah, I think that's what we were doing, and now we're making it explicit, and we're going to have a stage, like a place for each stage of a thing. And so hopefully we'll move away from that. I think a lot of that stuff happens just because you're solving problems sequentially, sort of, and forgetting to step back and go like, okay, what's our target condition?
Right.
It's kind of like, what's a little improvement we could make? So I think this is sort of where like 2-second lean breaks down a little bit. Is kind of like, I think we've talked about this, but the concept of peak seeking. And the big danger with a peak seeking heuristic is that if you build a robot to always go uphill, you can say it's going to reach the top, but in fact it can reach a local maximum.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue with...
It'll reach the top once.
Yeah, it reaches, like, if you look at a mountain, it might be like halfway up the mountain, but on a little sub-peak.
Yeah.
And if it was able to step back and have a broader view, it could go back down and up way further.
Yeah.
And I think in problem solving, that's sort of where the constant PDCA loops are critical. Is it is really useful to take those tiny steps every single day, and you are going to get really far, but it's also really important to make sure that you have some guidance in direction and targets.
Yeah.
To make sure you don't find a local optimum. And I think often we forget about that, and so our stations, a lot of them are just local optimum, not even super optimized, but just like it's a little better than it was yesterday, and that's always true, and it's slightly better and slightly cleaner, and this now got a label and that got a label, but stepping back, it doesn't make any sense. Or and like that's just, I don't know, hard to...
Stepping back 5 times back and forth over and over again.
So built a U-shaped cell. Pretty excited for it. The big downside I've found, and this is true with batching too, the second you make a whole cell more efficient, the inefficiencies all became less annoying, but they're still there. And so I think it's going to be a challenge because they now take less time and they're less annoying to keep surfacing them. And so I'm wondering how we're going to do that. Because I just noticed like the emphasis on how annoying it was that the printer is in the wrong place. I'm now hearing less about it, and that is
probably what you should do.
It's still in the wrong place.
Every time Sam walks in there, you tie one hand behind his back. That'll do it.
I was kind of thinking like, I suspect turning back and forth. Like I found that if you stick your head over the edge of the loft, you're looking right down on top of the shipping station. So I think I'm going to set up my camera up there and video Sam working in there, and then just let him watch it. And I feel like he'll kind of be like, ooh, that is crazy. All the back and forth would be my guess.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. Anyway.
Interesting. Not trying to be a copycat, but we also reorganized our shipping station. And also into a U.
Very nice. I think we're all copycats here.
Definitely. It's sort of phase 1 to test out. I think it was a good improvement. I have not personally been working in it and haven't gotten a lot of feedback so far.
Okay.
What I think it did really, and we kind of already knew this, but I think what it really brought to our attention is that the real challenges we have with shipping right now are more to do with like information flow and document management. And the actual moving of things was like a little bit of an annoyance, but not kind of our bottleneck in the shipping side of things. So that's kind of what we're still going to get, like right now. Coming back to the computer as a silly constraint, we share a computer between our shipping station and our laser marker. Those two things don't go well together physically in space, so the computer is in a weird place. Okay. So we're going to like buy another computer for the laser marker, move the shipping computer to a better position, give it its own printer, all that kind of stuff. But the key piece really is getting our document management better set up to like flow out of our ERP system. Right now there's a lot of like copying and pasting and manual document creation, and then like saving locally and uploading to that kind of whole rigmarole. Checking and double checking your numbers.
Yes, which I'm quite familiar. We just had some issues with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So also, if anyone out there has built out a packing slip purchase order template in Airtable that is flexible, like easy to use and generate, I would love to talk to you. Please reach out. There's a pretty good like utility in Airtable already for creating documents from an existing table that you have. Okay. But right now we're dealing with this thing where it's like it's silly that these are the kind of things that end up being real constraints. But we might have an order that has 4 part numbers. We might want to ship 3 of those part numbers to an anodizer, and it might be different than the quantity that we're going to ship to the customer, because maybe we're going to have a couple extras. So we almost need to have a duplicate set of information that's...
Ouch, I can see how this becomes either annoying or inaccurate.
Right, it's one of the two.
Yeah.
And then we need to be able to generate a second packing slip for that same data range for when we actually ship it to the customer and a purchase, anyway. So
that sounds really annoying.
It starts to become this little bit of a rigmarole. And
interesting.
So I'm putting a little bit of thought towards it, but have not actually started trying to make anything yet.
Right.
We did a little research this last week, but it seemed like most of the content we found on the web was oriented towards people doing just like basic order fulfillment.
Right.
Which is a little bit simpler, I think, than what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we haven't run into the issues you're describing.
Yeah.
Because someone places an order and we ship them that order, and that's that.
Right. So anyway, if anyone has any info, love to talk to you. Or if you just know Airtable really well and have an idea about how it might be done, love to talk to you too.
We have a very exciting one. So we've been working on getting our Kanban stuff into Coda. That has finally become largely a reality. And interestingly, the big push for this, which is sort of not what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Well, there's been two main benefits. One is to make adjusting our Kanbans faster. So before, when we were handwriting them, the idea of going and making a small change to 4 or 8 Kanbans and writing out 4 times this, all the information 4 times.
The wonderful thing there is the barrier to entry to make one is so
very low.
But the barrier to editing all of the ones you've made is very high. Very
high. And then we started getting fancy and putting QR codes on them, but that wasn't saved anywhere. So you have to go remake all the QR. Like, it's a big arts and crafts project, which is awesome in that it's very easy to get started. And I probably would recommend everyone start with just a stack of, index cards and a Sharpie to get moving. But we've kind of reached, we're moving away from that to make updating easier, and that's already coming into play. So that's super exciting. The other benefit of this is just enabling everyone to sort of automating a lot of the back end. Like, we were struggling to get emails generated easily from QR codes with where formatting persisted and all this just little inane stuff. That's just, it really makes a big difference, because we've seen a few failures where the Kanban got triggered. I've been busy. I'm the one who does reordering, which for no good reason, except that's how it is. And so we waited a few days, and then Sam was like, hey, we're out of titanium. Yeah. I was like, yikes. Okay. So just trying to fix those problems. A really fun win is that the way we're doing material ordering is we have 4 sheet pans of each material on a set of shelves or on a speed rack, and then we have 1 pan over by the CNC. And then we have a minimum set on our sheet pans, and the minimum is often 1 sheet pan. Sometimes it's 2 sheet pans depending on the stock. And in making these Kanbans in the new system, where we can build out a queue and set the urgency so that the notifications only go once a week, the order only gets placed once a week out of that system, we're going to have a Kanban on every single sheet pan. And so the second you do that, you can actually drop your minimums. The amount of stock we hold can get reduced, because while increasing the amount of buffer we have, which feels counterintuitive, but if you imagine you order 500 screws and then you reorder them when you're down to 100, you have 100 left when the Kanban gets triggered. If you bought 250 screws and you had a trigger at 50 when you used the first 50, and you had a trigger when you used the second 50 and the third 50 and the fourth 50, suddenly you have a lot more buffer the second you're sending information upstream to order 50 more screws. Right. So, like, obviously there's questions about, like, can you buy 50 screws at an affordable rate? Probably no. So maybe screws are a bad example. But I was sort of, once we thought it through, we were like, wait, this is like a win-win. This is great. And they're going to get aggregated. And so the ordering, the quantities aren't just like annoying and one at a time. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah.
You being the supplier, we can hear both sides of this.
Yeah.
You'd be like, all right, can we switch back, please? No, I don't know.
Which is kind of cool to be able to actually have a supplier who can have a discussion about it.
Yeah, and on a podcast, I feel like it's sort of
right.
Yeah, and that it's not a critical part of either one of our business.
Yeah,
makes it a much less like touchy subject, right? If you're like, dude, like, go find yourself a different way of cutting aluminum, that would be totally fine because that's what we were doing before this. But it is convenient. So anyway,
nice. This next one is in one of the classic. Well, two things: classic fix what bugs you, but also one of those like. Fresh eyes in the shop. Very, very, very helpful. On one of the first days we had Aiden there showing him how to change a tool. And one of the first things I had Ariel do when she hired on like 2.5 years ago was to organize a lot of our tool holder setup tools.
Okay.
And we had some random foam and she like made this little foam cutout. And I don't think she'd probably done a few tool setups, but I think I basically was like, make this stuff fit. So she like did it in a way, and I was like, oh, cool. It's better than it was before. Happened to be that the things you use most often were at the very back of the drawer. It's a very deep drawer.
Oh, yeah.
So I was showing Aiden how to set up a tool.
He's watching you like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Maybe he was doing it himself later. He was like, is there a reason all the wrenches are at the very back?
You're like, absolutely not.
I was like, no. He's like, can we just turn this around? I was like, that would be great. So
that's awesome.
A couple mornings ago, I actually just took everything out and spun it around, and
wow,
it is great.
Yeah.
It turns out the other stuff
well, it's also great because when you were describing it, I was like, okay, yeah, you should redo the layout, but it's like, that is a lot of work and there's a much easier, and maybe you'll do that also, but
maybe
for now, no. For now, it's
this was really like, it happened to have been arranged in a way that like
it was perfectly backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I've noticed when you go to layout foam, it's very easy, and we did this, like I have to redo a lot of the foam cutouts we did. You sort of lay it out like visually, it looks good and is on a grid, and it's not ergonomic at all. Like things are often rotated 90 degrees from the way you would pick them up or put them down.
Oh, interesting.
And that there's very little we have not given sufficient consideration to that aspect.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Interesting. I think eventually
of like vertically oriented screwdrivers, when actually if you think about how you reach into a drawer, it's like how you want them. Anyway.
Yeah, totally. That's funny. Eventually, I think, I don't know, I've gone back and forth on the concept of like having stuff in drawers in a way versus like out in the open, and the idea of like having, like sloped trays so you can't put stuff on it. I've gotten a lot of resistance to that idea, but I feel like it is a winning move.
To sloping things?
To like,
or
put
like
them
having instead of in drawers.
Sloped out, like accessible.
I think that's great because any horizontal surface, like I am not the neatest person by nature, and horizontal surfaces just get cluttered.
Yeah.
And like 3S helps declutter them, but like
but you're just repeating
just solve the problem at the source and make it an angled surface. The back of the sewing machine has these annoying little ledges that are perfect, and they're right by the door when you're walking out of the shop. And I have actually thought about just like, 3D printing something, or maybe just cardboarding it, where it's like, nope, don't put it here.
You need to get that stuff that they put on top of like
pigeon wire. That's a funny idea. Yeah.
Why is everything in here spiky?
Well, don't put stuff on it. I could put stuff on pigeon wire.
Figure out a way.
Yeah.
Today for my improvement, I made carabiners.
Yeah, totally. This is a tiny one. My dad was in the shop. He was visiting. And he was like, there's no way to close the door. So he added a pull loop on the door so you could pull it shut from the inside.
Oh, nice.
There's been so many times. Because you have like
a barn door kind of thing without a standard latch, right?
Yeah. So there's a dead bolt in it.
Yeah.
And then what I was doing when I wanted to close the door is you'd push it open, you'd sort of grab the side of it, give it some momentum, and it would sort of slam, Anyway, so that was great. Took about 5 minutes, and now we can close the door.
Nice.
Easily.
Yeah. We're running into this issue, which I think is probably not unique to us, of when a certain portion of a process is complete, not having kind of like a clear list of like what you do now. And
okay.
It's tended to be like, okay, these parts are done. Let's get them onto the next thing, and get me onto the next thing. And there's like inspection tooling, any specialty tooling, work holding, trays, stuff that just kind of get left there. And then also like having a clear idea of like what we need to check before it moves on to the next process.
Yep.
We've had a few things in the past where like we didn't do a count and we set the machine up for something else and we actually needed to make a couple more kind of a thing.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. So anyway, I just made a simple SOP printout. We have one printout at the machine that's like before you can put the green like good to go label on our little ring around the cycle start button. And they made a second one today that is what to do when you're done with a job. So kind of like before the green goes on and then when you're shutting down at the end of the day.
Very cool.
Now we have to actually like learn to follow them, but at least they're there and referenceable.
Yeah, both of those things are important steps.
Yeah. Like
make it, but also following it is hard.
Yeah. But anyway, just trying to solve the classic. Like one thing is like all of our half sheet pans always end up like at the machines empty. And then you're at the saw and you need somewhere to put the material coming off. You're like, you have to walk around and grab them all. Instead of that being part of the process of like at the end of the job, put the empty ones back.
Right.
Take the little tags that have the what job these are for off, put them back where they can get cycled into the next job sort of situation.
I wonder if it would help to jump right into solutions.
Yeah.
Seamlessly without thought.
Seamless segue into solutions.
An area near your job board for stacking the trays so that if you're headed back, I don't know where people are headed once they're done with it, but just like, hey,
good
grab
idea.
the trays and put them there. And then when you go to the board to get your cut list or something,
you're like next task.
You're next to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I like what you said too, that any of those. I'm going to, seeing as we're trying to keep this short, I'm going to rattle through 3 short ones.
Sounds
and
good.
Then hit a bigger one. I think I mentioned laminated cards to keep at the CNC, and so you can just write on them with dry erase, so that if you're having any issues with a part, you can write a note that then stays on that setup sheet, so the next time it gets run, that persists.
Yeah.
It has been super useful. I've used it, and even more excitingly, Sam also used it, so I came to one and I was like, oh, there's a note. I don't know what it means, but that's a separate issue. So that was great. Printed new tool tags in PETG.
Oh, cool.
They seem to do much better. And actually did some experimentation to eliminate tool 18 and tool 19 from our production tooling. Yeah. And so we just freed up 3 tool slots in our tool changer. One of the tools was not used anymore at all. And it just took me like a few minutes I built out a spreadsheet comparing, like looking at all the tools and all the programs.
And you just realized it wasn't
and
necessary.
I was like, that is, we had obsoleted it a long time ago, but in stages. And so there was never, it was never like, okay, it was used in one part and now we don't. Anyway, that is great from a SMED perspective of making more space so we can keep not doing tool changes.
Yeah. For as long as possible.
Exactly. Last one here. Sam added some little almost like ice cube trays that we had 3D printed a long time ago for a different purpose, and put them at the shipping station in different locations to avoid the over processing of counting parts, recounting parts. And so now parts that are produced when you're assembling buckles, when you're sewing straps, they get placed on this grid instead of just loosely in a pile, and then inevitably you're like, how many are there? And it's not a glance thing, it's now counting them up, and sure, it only takes 3 seconds because there's like 5 of them or 10 of them, but still. And then it's just way easier to see and include, like giving everything a place and every stage sort of a home.
Do you also use those for moving things from station to station?
We used to. Yeah. We don't anymore. So every station in the U-shaped cell, you sort of are reaching, like where you set the part down from step 1 is where you pick them up at step 2 is the goal.
Yeah. Cool.
Which begs the question, why are you setting it down if you're just going to pick it up again? But
batching.
Exactly. This is where U-shaped. Yeah, I think we can single piece flow through more steps.
Cool.
Yep.
Right on. Thanks, everybody. We will talk to you soon. Of course, you can find me at likenprecision.com on the internet, likenMFG on, liken_MFG on Instagram, the pod at incremental CI on Instagram.
And you can find me at austeremfg.com on the internet and austere_manufacturing on Instagram. And we have a Patreon. Check it out if you want. We have a lurker tier, which is very affordable. If you get value from this, it'd be awesome if you wanted to become a supporter. And we'll talk to you next week.
Adios.